Can I welcome all members who are joining us today. In the room this afternoon, we have John Stewart, we have Pat Sheehan, we have Pádraig Delargy and Trevor Lunn, and I am chairing the meeting remotely, so let's hope that it goes okay. We have apologies just for lateness at this point from Alex Easton and from Emma Sheeran. Also, sorry, joining us remotely, I just see, is Diane Dodds as well. So you're all very welcome. Members, this is a sad day, and I think we've all now digested the news of the sudden death of our committee colleague, Christopher Stolford. It's been 4 days since we've heard the news, and it's still quite unbelievable. So on behalf of the committee, I just want to express our sorrow at the loss of Christopher. He's been a member of this committee from back 2016, and our hearts go out to his wife, his children, his mum and siblings, and the wider family circle. I also want to pay our respects to his colleagues, and I think all of us were touched by their kind words about their colleagues, our colleague and friend on Monday in the Assembly. Like, our hearts are sore for you all at this time. Christopher was a larger than life individual, and I know that well. But the one thing he did do was he loved this place, and he was totally ingrained in the politics of our people and our place, and he will be sorely missed. I just want to say, may he rest in peace, and may those who grieve for him today be comforted by the esteem in which he has been held. And can I ask if other members of the committee would like to remember him? I think it's appropriate that we do so.
Chair, I'm not sure how we'll do it, but I'll start off. Thank you for that. I think it is important that we remember Christopher, and like you say, our hearts go out to Laura and his 4 children and to all his family and his DEP colleagues at this really sad time. I didn't have the privilege of being able to speak the other day, but the testaments and the tributes made to him in the chamber were just unbelievable, but totally fitting for the man that we knew. He only came in here a year before me, but he was just a font of all knowledge, an expert in parliamentary procedure, and just a really, really genuine person to be around. And as everyone continues to say, that even if you'd had a disagreement, and that could be with any one of us at times, it would always be a disagreement, but never disagreeable. And I think that was the making of him. And I just enjoyed every time we chatted. That humour always came out, and that infectious laugh, and that infectious smile. And yeah, it's been said time and time again. I think everything's been said that can be said, but this place will be worse off without him, and he will be sorely missed. So all our thoughts are with his young family as they come to terms with this awful news.
Could I also speak, Sinead? It was a delight to have known Christopher for the past number of years. He was a very talented man, great intellect and intelligence, but also a lovely sense of humour and great wit too. And he's one of the few people I know who could bring gravitas and humour to a debate, and indeed to his role as the Principal Deputy Chair of the Assembly. And I have no doubt he will be missed by everyone in this Assembly. He brought a degree of colour to the Assembly that most of us don't, and for that he will be missed. And I would also like to offer sympathy and condolences to his wife Laura, his children, his mother and wider extended family. I had the unfortunate experience in 2006 when my wife died to have to go in and tell our 6-year-old son the following morning. So, you know, my thoughts have been with Christopher's children this past few days, and who was going to break the news to them and how they would react to that. So, again, just to say, the whole family and all his colleagues and friends in the DUP have my sympathy and condolences. Thanks.
Can I ask Diane Dodds to come into the spotlight, please?
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. No, just to very simply say thank you to all who have expressed their sympathy. I think many of us really actually still are struggling to process what has happened. And really, we somehow or other round the chamber, we kind of expect him to come round the chair and to make a bit of a joke or a laugh about something, or to say something in the kind of caustic way that he could. So, as much as we miss him, his family will miss him more, and our thoughts are with them, and we send them our sympathy. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
Chair, could I perhaps say something?
Yes,
I think as a measure of Christopher that the tributes to him went on for 2.5 hours on Monday, and there wasn't an unkind word said about him, as you might expect. But when I did say on Monday that I got off to a bad start with him, because we had a bit of a Twitter encounter long before he arrived up here. And it was only when he arrived here and I began to realise the measure of the man, and his good humour and his intelligence, and the way he conducted himself, that my initial impression had been completely wrong. I don't mind admitting that. He was a terrific guy. He'll be sad he missed up here. He was a character, he was colourful, he was intelligent. His interventions and his debating skills were legendary. In fact, any time I got up over the last 5 years, I always assumed that Christopher would probably intervene at some stage, but cleverly, and he did it in a respectful way, and his interventions were actually quite well made, and made you think about them. It wasn't, sometimes you wonder why people intervene. You never wondered why Christopher intervened, because he was talking good sense. And my sympathies go to his wife and family also, obviously. And particularly to his DUP colleagues, who really had a bad few days there, and that showed on Monday. I felt a lot of sympathy for them too. So thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you. Thank you. If members are happy, could we just have a moment's silence, a minute's silence, so that we just can reflect, and I suppose even take a time to send our thoughts and prayers with his wife and family. Thank you. Okay. Item number 2 under Chair's business. Can I refer members to the letter from the department sent yesterday afternoon on the arrangements for an apology for victims and survivors of historical institutive abuse? You will have seen from that that the apology is going ahead, and it's going to be made by the remaining ministers and the relevant institutions on the 11th of March at Parliament buildings. The exact arrangements are to be confirmed, but I have to say I've had, and I don't know if other members have had, but I've had a couple of phone calls from a few of the survivor groups. And there's still a lot of concern in and around the apology. One survivor group, the Survivors Together, had a long conversation with me last week, and they're very angry, or last night, sorry. They're very angry about the apology going ahead because they're very concerned about the redress. and then there's some members within the Rosetta Trust that are expressing disappointment that it's not First Minister and Deputy First Minister. I'm just putting that on the record to committee members, because I think it's not just all plain sailing at the moment, and a lot of work has to be done in order to make sure that the victims and survivors feel that the apology is meeting the promises and the expectations that they should absolutely deserve, so, and should receive. Can I also maybe invite the Deputy Chair? Does anybody have any comments about that, the preparations and the arrangements for that apology? No?
Chair, the only point I was going to make, I'm assuming that the Executive Office is in correspondence with the victims groups and the Victims Commission to keep them up to date on the plan for the day and the venue and everything else, and that the logistics are all in place to ensure that that date does go ahead. Given the difficulties up to now, that there'll be no more bumps in the road ahead of that?
It's my understanding that they have set up a group with the executive ministers and the victims and survivors, so that they can communicate effectively with one another, and so that nobody is blindsided in relation to their arrangements, and indeed the words that are going to be used as well. So I'm hoping that there's a great deal of transparency and good communication in and around it that is satisfactory to the victims and survivors. Okay, can I ask the Deputy Chair, could he maybe give members an update on the visit that he attended today from a delegation from the House of Commons Procedures Committee?
Yep, Chair, no problem. Myself and Diane Dodds and the clerk, along with Shauna, met with the committee today. It was chaired by the former Secretary of State, Karen Bradley, who will be no stranger to this place, and a number of other MPs. They are undertaking an inquiry into the practice and procedures of the House of Commons and how it engages with the United Kingdom's territorial constitution, and looking at better ways for interparliamentary relations, especially post-EU, specifically around funding, for example, and how additional scrutiny could be taking place around that. And we give them some examples into the work of the Executive Office and how the scrutiny works here. They were interested in how the operation model works here, because you'll be aware that the Prime Minister has just set up the Department of the Prime Minister, or the Office of the Prime Minister, and that then will involve scrutiny through a new department that he has created, and they were curious to see how it worked here. We had some discussion, for example, around the Community Renewal Fund, and how scrutiny of that is or is not happening here compared, and whether something could be arranged to ensure that scrutiny could happen around that. I think it was worthwhile. I was at pains to point out that while myself and Diane only represented one aspect of the committee, that if the other members were there, that potentially they might have heard a slightly different version of things, and that was that point. Hopefully, Michael, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but was well made. I tried to let the buyers be aware that there were alternative views to the ones we were putting across, but for the most of it, it was mainly factual exchange of information. They then had a lunch. I think they were meeting with our committee, with the Procedures Committee here as well, and they met with the Speaker to get an insight into the operational things. So this was their first visit to the devolved regions. They'll be going to Scotland and Wales and then reporting back. So nothing really much more to add to that, Chair, unless, Michael, you can think of anything else, or Diane potentially wants to come in just to add anything to it. Nope. That's that.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair, just to say, I mean, I, like John, thought it was a really useful enough exercise. I think that they are writing a report which government may or may not act upon, but the idea that we would be able to enhance scrutiny, particularly over funds like the Shared Prosperity Fund, would be very, very good, given that it is going to be a Whitehall government department that administers those, and not a department here.
Okay, and apologies, I was unable to attend that today, as I've had to remain here in the constituency for another event. So my fourth item of business under Chair's business is just to raise the issue, the committee last week was informed that the junior ministers would be unable to attend the committee without the First Minister and Deputy First Minister in place. I am still not clear on what is going on in relation to the Executive Office. So if I'm not clear, I don't think the wider public will be clear in terms of scrutiny purposes as well. This week, the Junior Minister, Kearney, attended a meeting of the Joint Committee, and in it he indicated that he was representing the Executive Office. And so that's kind of counter to what our briefing was last week from the Permanent Secretary. And when we asked for the junior ministers to attend to our committee, we were told that they couldn't. So I really want, if members are happy, or do they agree that we write to the department to clarify what duties the junior ministers are still undertaking, and to remind the department it is the role of the committee to scrutinise the junior ministers. So if they are clearly still undertaking duties as junior ministers, then we need to invite the junior ministers before the committee to provide a briefing of the work that they are undertaking. And if junior ministers have the authority to attend events, well, then they have to have the accountability of scrutiny as well. So if members are happy that I write to the department and ask for those clarifications, I still don't know if the junior minister was there representing the Executive Office. Well, he can't be representing the executive because there is no executive. What observations were being made and on behalf of whom, I really don't know. And this is not about Junior Minister Kearney in any shape, form or fashion. It is the office that I'm questioning the role. And I think that we as the committee need clarity around this. There definitely is a great deal of uncertainty. Are members happy that I proceed by writing to the department for further clarification?
Chair, I'm happy to agree with that, and I just want to add to a few of the points. I think the points you make are well made. I mean, this is not just about now, but given the legislative changes to the way the structures will continue, if there is political turbulence in the future, this situation could arise in the future. So it begs the question, if the junior ministers remain in post, who are they junior to? Who are they taking guidance from or steer from in the absence of any, for the term, senior ministers, in the absence of the First and Deputy First Minister? Are they continuing to be paid an uplift? Are they continuing to have access to Stormont Castle and to ministerial cars? And did they attend the Joint Council meeting the other day? And representation is always good, but at whose direction were both junior ministers there? These are all questions that, I think we're right to ask. The job of this committee is to scrutinise and to ask questions. And if the answer to any of those is yes, then they should still be appearing in front of the committee and being scrutinised as part of that role. That's my belief. So if we could maybe add some of those in too, and ask the Permanent Secretary for clarity as quickly as possible. Conscious that time's probably running out anyway, but it would be good to know, if not for now, then certainly for the future.
And certainly you raise an issue there about pay for First Ministers, Junior Ministers, SPADs. Given if there's no functions being discharged for the public, then what is happening in those aspects as well? So they're all very valid points, and none of it's personal to individuals, but certainly as a role here within the committee, we need to know the answers to these questions. Okay, members happy? Okay. Item number 3, draft minutes. Members, the draft minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of February 2022 are on pages 6 to 11 of the meeting pack. Members, if you're content that the minutes are a true reflection of the proceedings of the meeting, I'm happy to sign. Are members happy?
Yep.
Okay. Matters arising. The first matter arising is just to inform members that the stakeholder event in relation to the strategy to tackle violence against women and girls is taking place tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. If I can refer to pages 13 to 14 of the meeting pack for the relevant papers. Members, obviously this is a virtual event taking place on Zoom. Members who do not have access to Zoom can enter the event through the browser option. The format of the event is as follows. At 10 o'clock it will kick off with introductions from engagement and welcome by myself. And then at 10:10 discussions in the breakout rooms will start or will commence. So there's three key items and themes which we have already discussed. And then at 10:55 we're going to have feedback from the three sessions, and then at 12 or 11:25 just closing remarks. So it should all be finished up by 11:30 at the latest. Okay, I believe John, you have indicated that you're going to help support us in one of the breakout rooms, so I'll take the lead in one of them, and John in another, and obviously I think the chair's going to do the third breakout room. I'm just hoping that it all goes nice and smoothly. Just sounds very complicated, but I'm sure it'll go absolutely brilliantly.
Chair, I have a diary malfunction, but I will be along. Thankfully Sarah stepped in temporarily. Should I not be able to make it? I have a PIP appeal in the morning. I'm representing somebody, so hopefully it's done in time,
okay.
just in case.
Okay.
Chair.
And can members please advise, if you can, if you are attending, just to let us know.
Chair, could I offer my apologies? I'll be tied up in the integrated education debate in the chamber tomorrow.
Yeah, and I do know that members are torn between the plenary tomorrow and other issues, so we do accept that.
Chair, can I also offer my apologies? I will be in the debate in the chamber tomorrow as well.
Okay,
Can I
that's
offer
great.
my apologies as well? Yeah.
Okay, that's fine, Corey. Thank you. Can I remind members that last week's meeting, the committee agreed to consider the report on the ad hoc committee on the Bill of Rights. It is acknowledged that there was a debate in the chamber on the report, and I didn't intend to repeat that debate in the committee, but members may wish to consider what actions to take, if any, as the human rights falls within the remit of this committee, and that's why I'm really conscious of it. So we had the ad hoc committee looking at it, and obviously, you know, the relevant papers are in our pack from pages 15 to 160. I'm conscious also that the report doesn't contain any clear recommendations that the committee can pursue, but because it falls under our remit, I just want to kind of, you know, finish it off. What do we do now as a committee to further the aims and objectives of a Bill of Rights that, you know, that was a promise within the Good Friday Agreement and subsequent. So it is within our remit. It is one of our duties and responsibilities. And I was just wondering, has members given it any consideration on the next action and how we pursue the continuance of exploring ways to fulfil that commitment?
Chair, if I could come in there.
Yes, please, Emma, thank you.
So I think the onus on us all here is to identify and call it out in terms of where the blockage has come. As you've rightly and correctly pointed out there, this has been a commitment that was spoken about as far back as the 60s, but it was committed to in 1998 and it was committed to in 2020 as part of NDNA. And we had a process whereby all of the main political parties came together, engaged in almost 2 years worth of work, took a lot of evidence from a lot of stakeholders and experts who kindly gave up their time, and when parties were asked to provide position papers, the DUP provided one in which they stated that they did not think there was merit in having a Bill of Rights and that any Bill of Rights should focus on principles as opposed to rights. So we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room is that the DUP do not want to have a Bill of Rights, which they articulated very clearly in the chamber on last Monday night. And we're not going to make progress until we all ask the question, why is that? What is provoking that reaction from the DUP, and work through that, because the evidence that we gathered from the general public told us that over 80% of the population want to see a Bill of Rights for the North. They want to see socio-economic rights. They want to see rights that put to the forefront the things that are impacting on us all and all of our constituents, as we're all going to hear now as we come into an election cycle. And we know that a Bill of Rights would alleviate a lot of those stresses and would deliver things for people. So that's I think, in terms of a role of a committee, if you're asking what we can all do, it's ask that question and call it out and identify where the blockage is and try and remove that blockage as a priority.
Would any other members like to come in here? If you can raise your hand when it comes back, because I find it hard to see. Trevor? Okay, Trevor.
Thanks, Chair. I think Emma's committee has done a sterling job on this for the last 2 years, but they've come to the same blockage as the previous committee a number of years ago, which sat for a very long time and frankly got nowhere for the same reason. Why people should be objecting to something that was contained in the Good Friday Agreement, which, okay, certain parties didn't sign, but also an NDNA, which they apparently did support. And now we get this report, which is far-reaching, detailed, it's good stuff, and suddenly just say, no, we don't think this is necessary. It just about sums this place up, frankly.
It is very frustrating because, we have to move it on in some way. It feels like the Maze, the Maze prison story and the Maze department, or the lands there. We just can't keep on sitting on things and not actually doing the hard graft with it. Look, members, we probably could go round and round the houses, and we have done for many, many years now around a Bill of Rights. People's rights don't take away anybody else's rights. They support all. But anyway, I propose that we write back to the department and ask what are the next steps. I mean, 2 years ago, the next step was setting up an ad hoc committee in order to deal with it, so to separate it out. We've done that. It hasn't worked either. I propose we bring it back to the department and say, where does it rest now? As I say, good work, well done as well, Emma, for your diligence around this in relation to chairing it. It's greatly unfortunate, and I think we as a committee have to call that out and state quite clearly that it's unfortunate that we didn't get to pursue and develop a comprehensive Bill of Rights fit for our people and our place in 2022. It's unfortunate, but if members are happy for us to write back to seek clarification now on next steps. Okay, item number 5, Council for Catholic Maintained Schools and Catholic Schools Trustee Service, Fair Employment School Teachers Bill, oral briefing. Can I refer members to pages 161 to 237 of the meeting pack for the relevant papers? And can I welcome to the meeting Mr. Jerry Campbell, Chief Executive of CCMS, Mr. Tony McCusker, CCMS, Council Member, Chair of the Finance and Personnel Committee, Ms. Patricia Carville of CCMS, Vice Chair of Council and Member of CCMS, Finance and Personnel Committee. And can I welcome also my Bishop, Donald McKeown, Chair of Council and Chair of CSTS. And can I advise you all that the session is being recorded by Hansard, and the video of the meeting will be available on the committee website. Can I invite now members to deliver your brief to the committee?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just maybe kick off some introductory comments, and perhaps then there can be questions or whatever you want. We're very happy to engage in this conversation with you. Can I begin by just expressing our condolences on behalf of CCMS and CSTS to all of you for the loss of a colleague, Christopher Stalford. I, as Chief Executive then of CCMS, also wrote to the to the head of the DUP, expressing our condolences as well, if not already. So it's a sad day for all of you. I appreciate that, but thank you for all the work you do. We're trying to get, as you say, a decent little country going here, and it takes the work of all of us to try and ensure we get it as right as it can be, especially for our young people. I just have a few introductory comments, if that's okay, Chair, and then we can begin a conversation as you seek. Okay. I suppose the 1976 fair employment legislation allowed for a number of exceptions, including the employment of teachers. And at that stage, it's a long time ago, all of the main churches considered the exception of teachers from the legislation to be a valid mechanism for protecting the identity of schools with a faith-based tradition. That's a long time ago, 1976, 45 years ago. And then these exceptions were subsequently also included in the 1988 veto, the Fair Employment Treatment Order. Now, I think it's important for me to say that the trustees of Catholic schools, and that's the hat, or one of the hats I'm wearing at the present time, and CCMS are, and always have been, opposed to discrimination on religious or political grounds. Our objective has only ever been to assess whether a candidate understands and supports the Catholic ethos, the identity of the school. There's never been any suggestion that I know of that a teacher failed to be appointed to a Catholic school because of their religion or political opinion. So the trustees of Catholic schools and CCMS continue to believe that the values and ethos of a Catholic education are critical to the identity of the Catholic schools, but we consider that the exception in the 1998 order is no longer appropriate or required. As an aside, all that legislation at that stage in the 1988 time almost worked on the assumption everybody was Catholic or Protestant. That's a bizarre assumption for any political decisions in 2022 in a very diverse Northern Ireland. Catholic schools, as you know, are increasingly diverse and welcoming to all children. 52%, for example, of newcomer children have opted to go to Catholic schools, many of them from outside the Christian tradition. So our schools are diverse and welcoming to all children, and we believe our teaching workforce should reflect that. Therefore, the trustees of Catholic schools and CCMS would support the repeal of the Article 71 exception as it applies to the recruitment of teachers. However, the trustees and CCMS will want to have the right to promote our ethos, and will want to ensure that the ethos and values of Catholic education continue to permeate those schools. We will, of course, wish to negotiate the post-veto arrangements, but I think we have the right to expect that all teachers understand and are committed to the ethos of the Catholic schools in which they wish to teach. Teachers in Catholic primary schools, and for some designated posts in Catholic post-primary schools, may also, as a genuine occupational requirement, continue to require a certificate in religious education. That's not restricted to Catholic teachers, are widely available at St Mary's University College, John Ministry University College, and Ulster University. So I hope it's clear from what I've said there that we're looking to develop something that's fit for purpose to ensure that, as you talk about the Bill of Rights, that people who choose to access a particular form of education are not disadvantaged in their ability to access that, and that Catholic schools are enabled to at least ensure that somebody joining their school, just as other sectors would want to do the same, are in support of the ethos of the school. So I hope that at least opens up the discussion for you and is reasonably clear, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further briefings?
If I may come in, Chair, as Jerry Campbell, Chief Executive of CCMS, and just in addition to the points raised by Bishop Donald McKeown, to say that we want to work in collaboration with our politicians and with other stakeholders in what will be the post-veto situation, because there's been a lot of debate, as we all know, quite recently over the last number of months about the education system, the diversity, inclusivity of our education system. We strongly believe that Catholic education and faith-based education has a very strong role to play within the Northern Irish education system. There is a place for Catholic schools, there's a place for faith-based education. Indeed, there's a place for all of our sectors in terms of the inclusivity and adding to a diverse educational system. But we want to play our part and post the repeal of the exception. We want to continue working with this committee and with other political stakeholders to ensure that we're able to protect ethos in our Catholic schools, which have been a shining light and a shining beacon over the past 40, 50 years in terms of the high quality of education, along with our other sectoral partners in the controlled, integrated Irish medium, grammar, etc. We all have a role to play, but certainly Bishop has outlined the current position that we have, and hopefully we will be able to, in the new mandate, work with this committee and other politicians moving forward.
Thank you very much, Bishop Donal and Jerry, for your briefing. And can I acknowledge the contribution that Catholic education has made to wider society and to individuals, and it's absolutely in no way in question at all. I think there's lots of room in our society for faith-based education and all of that, and we're the richer for it. But can I just suppose maybe address a couple of the things? If the exemption was removed, what impact do you actually think that it would have on pupils in Catholic schools?
Can I come in just with first comments? I think since we've never used it, it won't have any effect. Our only concern is that this might be used as sort of a Trojan horse in order to try to remove any ability for Catholic schools to say that they are different in terms of their ethos from other sectors. My understanding, I stand to be corrected if necessary, that perhaps the only sector that actually has actively needed this exception may have been some schools in the integrated sector, which wanted to ensure that they had a balanced workforce.
Yeah.
In other words, as long as boards of governors are entitled to say, look, do you understand the ethos of this school and are you prepared to work within that and support it? We have no need whatever to say that you appoint someone just because of their perceived religious affiliation.
Can I just throw this in to the conversation as well? You know, ethos is very much, you know, an individual understanding, should we say. Like ethos could be just about people's attitudes. It could be about the leadership. Like I go into some schools. I'm not, well, I will name one. Say I go into St Cecilia School in Craigan. I immediately feel the warmth, in that school. But that's about leadership. I don't necessarily think it's the Catholic ethos, because the same I could feel. I could have that atmosphere in other faith-based schools or other non-faith schools. Sometimes it's about attitude, it's about the culture, it's about being aspirational, being ambitious, and that, it's not just about the faith of the school or the ethos of it. So how do you think you would preserve, or do you think it would be negated, the ethos of a school if this bill went through?
No, as long as boards of governors are entitled to say, have you any idea of the particular ethos of this school and are you prepared to support it? We actually have never discriminated against anyone on the basis of their perceived religious affiliation. That would be a meaningless thing to do nowadays. Just because you are called by a particular Christian or first name doesn't mean you have any allegiance to any particular thing. So, I mean, what we've said clearly is that if this is removed, that won't affect us in any way, as long as it's not a Trojan horse to ensure that we're not able to ask a teacher, do you actually support the ethos of the school, and risk being accused of being discriminatory because of that.
Yeah, and there has been suggestions made that the possibility of bringing in this bill perhaps to secondary schools first, so staging it, how do you feel about, would the effect be if the exemption were removed for secondary schools only?
We have never used it in secondary schools. We have had Presbyterian elder as principal of a large Catholic school. We have had people who are not from the Catholic community who are in senior positions in Catholic schools. Of course we have them. That's not a problem. We've had that for years. We have sort of plenty of examples where people choose a local Catholic school and come from other perceived backgrounds precisely because it's a Catholic school and they enjoy that. So removing that isn't going to affect any appointments in any schools, as long as we can say, look, do you understand the ethos of this particular school? That's all.
Chair, if I could make the comment just to go in on the back of Bishop there, but our statement has outlined the position in relation to not only post-primary but primary. So the position is fairly clear, I think, in terms of what we've outlined this afternoon. But the caveat to that, we want to work in terms of a post-veto and whatever would come through legislatively. We want to work with politicians to ensure that an ethos in the school can be protected, because you referenced obviously a visit to St Cecilia's, a fantastic post-primary school based in Derry. But that school, like many of our other Catholic schools, it is epitomised by a strong ethos, it's epitomised by a strong leader, supported by a strong set of governors, and at the highest quality of education with wraparound pastoral care, developing those young girls to be the very best that they can be, to make a contribution to the local community, to wider society, and ultimately to the economy as well. That's all these elements all come together. It's a very strong mix, and certainly leadership is an important element of that as well.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to bring other members in now to ask questions, and I have to say there are other schools and other constituencies as well, not just my own 4 constituencies, other good schools. So can I bring Diane Dodds into the spotlight, please?
Sorry, yes, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to all. Nice to see everyone again. Our paths seem to cross at an enormous rate these days. I am interested. I think that we have got to the stage where most people believe that the exemption is doesn't sit easily with a modern Northern Ireland. So I kind of think that many people have said that to us. But it was interesting in that the transferers organisation, which we spoke to last week, and yourselves both raised a particular issue, and that was one of guaranteeing ethos. And it's very, very interesting that we should be having this conversation, because, of course, tomorrow we're going to debate the Integrated Education Bill in this House. And actually, the Integrated Education Bill starts off in its first clauses by actually defining what the ethos of a school is in law. What's your view of that in a post-veto arrangement for other schools?
I think one of the characteristics of modern liberal society is respect for diversity in all ways. I think one of the characteristics of our education systems, particularly since the Thatcherite period, has been competition between schools. There is a market out there where schools seek to sell themselves to attract pupils to come to them and parents to support them. I think Catholic schools are very happy to put our distinctive offering on the table for parents. And I suppose the reality is that many people want a range of options to be available, but an awful lot of them want to have access to Catholic education. And unless we actually say we have a particular ethos that we can clearly articulate, then why on earth would we exist as a diverse sector? Why would any sector claim to be diverse and have something distinctive, some unique selling point? So, yeah, I think Catholic education is constantly trying to articulate what it is it stands for, how that ethos can help deliver quality social outcomes and quality academic outcomes. And we are happy to be part of a modern, diverse society that leaves room for diversity and ensures that all of us are working together to ensure the best quality outcomes, particularly for those who are being failed by the system as it currently exists. I think it's important also to recognise, I've heard figures from certainly from Northern Ireland here, that in this past 3 years there have been a lot more complaints to the PSNI about racial abuse than sectarian abuse. And perhaps if we kept a focus on that big picture, on that 2022 picture, rather than the 1998 picture, we might actually focus on how we ensure that all of our schools work together to provide quality social and educational outcomes for all our young people. diversity is of the essence of who we are in Northern Ireland into the future, where diversity is cherished and not regarded as being something alien or undesirable. So I'm happy that we continue to try to articulate our ethos, that other sectors articulate theirs, though I think most of the integrated school sector would say that ethoses are individual to their schools. There's not much in terms of an agreed shared ethos across the sector. At least I've been told that from within the integrated sector. So we are happy to try and develop whatever links we can to ensure that by pulling together rather than fragmenting, as people very often do or are inclined to in modern societies, that by pulling together, by ensuring that our links with communities are very strong, that we are prepared to offer the transcendent horizon to all of our educational processes, that we actually can develop a quality outcome that enables so many of our young people who are suffering from depression, from mental illness, from suicide ideation, from all of those things, to actually have hope for the future rather than fear of the future. Yes, we recognise all the challenges that are out there, and we want to ensure that our distinctive ethos is a contributor to civic life. And that working with all other partners, as I think we do very well in Derry here, where we have a very integrated education provision across the various sectors, that we can look to the future with confidence rather than with fear.
Diane, if I could possibly come in on the back of the Bishop there as well, to say that the diversity within our education system is strength. There's actually a place for each of us at the table, and that place should be on an equal basis, because we all bring our particular strengths, and parents still continue to make a preference for an education for their child, which is in line with their philosophical convictions. And speaking of Catholic education, it's very strong across the world. Many schools exist in many countries across the world, and the Catholic education is cherished and supported. We believe that it will continue to have a strong place at the table within Northern Ireland, along with our partners, on an equal basis, because we're all delivering a common curriculum. We're funded exactly the same way through the Department of Education, and we all want to continue to strive to develop our partnerships even further. We've come a long way. Schools were well ahead of politicians and other aspects of society in terms of reaching out and working together in partnership. But in doing that, there must always be a place for each of us moving forward with our respective ethos.
Can I just add?
Sorry, just so that I don't forget the point. So, that's perfectly possible at my age. Could you? I accept entirely, and I think it is a good thing that we have a diverse choice offering system in Northern Ireland, so parents can choose the education that they want for their child, whether that is an integrated education, a Catholic maintained education, a grammar school education, or an education in a non-selective school. I think that variety of choice can be a strength, and really I think what I would love us all to focus on is the inequalities in accessing education and where we need to do better. So that's not the issue for me, and I accept the role that each sector will play and welcome the role that each sector will play. But I'm just interested in, where we are debating the integrated education bill, and one of the clauses in that integrated education bill defines specifically for us what an integrated school is. So an integrated school is one that intentionally supports, protects and advances, etc., etc., etc. Now, the transferors representatives were with us last week, and they indicated that they wanted to understand in post arrangement where the exemption is gone, how we would protect ethos. It seems that in the integrated education bill we're protecting it in law. Do you think it's necessary to protect ethos in law, or is ethos something we live with, we choose, we work with? That's really the nub of where I want to go. Not really that we. I accept Bishop McKeown's argument that actually the exemption doesn't do anything for ethos, because it it's irrespective, really. The ethos is the ethos of the school.
I think what we would want is the agreement that we can apply our ethos. But if one sector got legislative protection for its ethos, then that would seriously affect the other sectors, because it means that the other sectors have no legal protection while one sector has it. So I think if there was a suggestion that one sector would have legal protection for its ethos, then that should apply to all sectors.
Well, it's not a suggestion, it's in the bill. I'm actually sitting with the bill in front of me at the moment. It is in the bill.
And as you know, how we see the bill as one-sided in terms of its support.
No, well, you know my argument on this, and you know exactly where I stand. But I'm just interested that this is an issue that came up last week, and it's an issue that you have raised this week.
And I think our position has always been that we have our ethos, and we will continue to have our ethos, and we will continue to select our teachers on the basis that they actually understand and accept our ethos.
Thank you, Chair. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring in the Deputy Chair for a question? Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Jerry and team, and Bishop McKeown, thank you so much for coming along today. Really appreciate this. I think it's good to get an insight into it, and I think what we've heard, as Diane and others have said, is that there is broad agreement that this is outdated anomaly within fair employment, and it has to go. And I'm pleased to hear, Jerry, that yourself echoing the words made by, I think, one of your predecessors, Eugene O'Neill, who, when I was doing some research today, when he presented to the Education Committee in 2013, said that our council finds the notion of discrimination on grounds of one's religion as abhorrent, and is on record as saying so, and would be quite happy to see it removed. And it's somewhat just startling that 9 years on we're still having the same conversation, that nothing's moved on, and I'm glad to hear that remains the position of both CCMS and CSTS. So that is good, and hopefully this private members bill, granted with a limited amount of time left in this mandate, can actually get through and put those changes into law. Just at one point I want to pick up on, though, is potentially the impact of this. I understand that in requests and references for applications for principals posts, CCMS can ask referees to rank the applicant on their commitment to Catholic education. What is your understanding of whether this question could be asked if the private members bill does pass? And how do you feel, for example, someone who is potentially or is agnostic or atheist would be able to adequately provide evidence of that to an employer who is writing a reference, so as not to inadvertently be discriminated against during that employment process?
Yeah, Pat Carville, Vice Chair of Council. I suppose I have been working chairing panels for leadership roles in the Catholic maintained sector for the last 20 years. And yes, it's one of the questions. However, we have just reviewed our scheme of management, and it's all up for review. That was one of the things that was highlighted, that in fact there were several things on that reference which said, what is their classroom practice like? And I mean, you know, for a chair of board of governors, it's very difficult to ascertain whether or not the principal or the vice principal of the school is a good classroom practitioner. So I think there's a number of anomalies within the reference that you quote, John. So we are having a new scheme of management, and we will be reviewing it.
Okay.
But I would agree that it's very difficult to say, you know, if someone is committed to, they may write it down, yes, they are, but that doesn't actually mean that they are committed to the Catholic ethos. I think you have to tease that out within an interview situation.
I suppose if I could come in there as well, John.
Absolutely.
Bishop, in his initial statement, referenced the 1976 Act, you know, and when that legislation went through, the world here is a different place than what it was 45 years ago. And things have moved on. And in terms of where we see the exception going and the repeal, etc., you know, we will continue to review all our recruitment procedures and how they fit with any future landscape. The one thing I would say, I was also a governor in a primary and a post-primary school for quite a number of years before I took up this post, and chaired and participated in numerous recruitment and selection panels, and every single candidate was always selected on a merit principle. As an individual in any walk of life, that's how you recruit and select individuals for the jobs. And for me, the whole idea would be absolutely abhorrent if an individual is not selected for a job on that basis. So moving forward, we do believe that the landscape has totally changed. It's a different world we live in now from 1976, indeed from 1998 when the FETO amendment and the legislation went through there. So I think things are changing, but we want to work very, very proactively with this committee and others in terms of whatever will happen with the legislation moving forward.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. That's really useful. I mean, I'm a governor on 2 schools myself, so I understand, that process and how much effort goes into securing that. And I'm also passionate about the ethos that exists in the schools that I work with and the schools that my kids go to, and I understand that. I suppose just teasing out that point, though, what you said that the potentially the consequences that could come from this private members bill impacting on the ethos. Just to get back to the point I was making, do you think it is possible, or maybe this is the case already, that someone who is atheist or agnostic is able to maintain and promote the ethos within the Catholic maintained schools, for example?
It already happens, John, because society has changed. If I go back over that 45 years or the 24 years, society has changed. It's much more secular and pluralist. We will have many people teaching in Catholic schools who may be nominally Catholic. We will have other teachers who will be from another Christian denomination, and indeed some who may be atheist.
Yeah.
We need a commitment to the ethos of the school, but we want the right person, the right teacher, the right leader, and quite frankly, as long as they can commit and deliver that highest quality education within the ethos of the school, that's what we want. We want the right person.
Okay, that's very useful. And just to finally, just to get that head around that, Patricia, you said that in terms of how references are being sought, that is being reviewed at the minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that will change going forward.
We have had concerns for some time that to rank order somebody 1 to 6 on any of the criteria is very subjective, and we have changed our scheme of management to a competency based process. So it would be the same with getting a reference. It will be more a competency based. How competent is this person to work in the school or to lead the school? So I'm talking really about the leadership roles. We would rarely use in the school that I'm chair of governors, and we don't have a reference 1 to 6 in any of the appointments that we make, but it is under review at the moment. Yes.
That's great. No, thanks so much for taking my questions and for helping me tease out those issues. Really important. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And can I bring Trevor London, please? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it's nice to meet Bishop Donal and Jerry and Tony and Patricia again. I spent almost 10 years in the Education Committee, and a lot of talk about ethos today. I must say, I was in an awful lot of schools right across the spectrum in those days, and the ethos in the Catholic schools was plain to see. As soon as you walked in the door, it was apparent, and I think the Catholic education system has every reason to be proud to maintain that ethos. The question would be whether this particular change would undermine or risk undermining that particular ethos. And having said that, I would also say when we went to integrated schools, which we did frequently as well, that there was a very clearly defined ethos there as well. It's good for a school. It enhances the school to have a particular ethos. So for that reason, I'm somewhat torn, I must confess, about this change, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing or worthwhile. But a few questions. I think, Patricia, you mentioned the appointment of a principal and the need to ascertain their commitments to the aims and values of a Catholic education. I only know of one Catholic school in my time that had a non-Catholic principal, and that was in Port Stewart. Are there any others? Is this not a one-off, or is it an occasional thing that actually happens, that somebody of non-Catholic backgrounds might become the principal of a Catholic school?
We don't have figures in front of us, Trevor. I know the example that you've referred to.
He's on council.
He actually would be a member of council as well. I think while we welcome the changes that are likely to come afoot here, we come here very proactively this afternoon, and we're in a position of we welcome this moving forward. I welcome the comments from yourself and a number of members, including the chair, in relation to having been in Catholic schools and the quality of Catholic schools in terms of the education. And again, that's we actually think that Catholic education will still be strong and be progressive and proactive moving forward should legislation change. And the important thing to go back to, and that's why I do particularly reference the comments made, Catholic education, along with our other educational partners and other sectors, we all have a contribution to make to enriching and improving the lives of thousands of young people on a yearly basis. We all have a part to play, and it is really welcoming to hear the fact from a number of members this afternoon about the quality of Catholic schools and the difference that they're making. And this legislation will not affect the impact that Catholic schools continue to make. We will continue to see our schools delivering the highest quality of education and developing our young people to make a contribution to society and to the economy. In terms of inclusivity, we all have work to do, and I don't want to go over necessarily the narrative that has been played back over the past number of months, but our schools are very much based in their local communities, and Catholic schools, that's what they are, they're based in local communities. We have work to do as a society in terms of moving forward, in terms of even housing and where our communities live. But if a Catholic school is based in the heart of an area which is predominantly nationalist, for example, or Catholic, it's going to draw its pupils from the area. But we want to be outward focusing. We want to be able to attract the best quality and highest quality teachers and leaders and governors to our schools. And to be quite honest, if these are people come, long as they've got the right skills and attributes and the right people for the job, that's what we want. We don't look at somebody whether they're a Catholic or a Protestant or an atheist or somebody coming from another faith tradition. We want the right person who can make the difference to those young people who are in the classroom to be the very best that they can be.
I think the other thing to add is our hope is that with the removal of veto, that we will actually draw a wider base of applications to our schools so that our schools reflect the diversity of the society we live in, and particularly reflect the diversity of the schools that we have, which are becoming more diverse as we move forward.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. I read the notes fairly thoroughly today. I noticed that, I probably should have known this before anyway, that the religious affiliation of a candidate for a teaching post is not actually revealed to the selection panel, which I think it would probably be illegal anyway, but it is the case, it's not revealed. Can I take it on that basis that you wouldn't actually know what proportion of the Catholic teaching force across the country is non-Catholic?
It's pretty well guesswork at this stage, but if this emerges, this legislation changes, then we will be required to monitor our workforce, and that will be one of the areas that will become fairly apparent as we go forward. Yeah. Just what the composition of every part of the workforce is in education.
Yeah.
And it's probably more likely to be higher in the post-primary sector than in the primary sector.
Yeah, it's fair to say there is a representation. And
yes.
it hasn't damaged your Catholic ethos, your Catholic system. In fact, it's probably enhanced it in some ways, I would have thought.
Absolutely.
Just turning to the integrated schools, Bishop Donald mentioned them. I can remember at the Education Committee, I think Bishop Donald, you might have been there on a particular day, and I asked, there was 3 bishops there actually, Bishop McAreevy was there, and I can't just remember the other one. And I asked them were they satisfied with the preparation for the sacraments that occurred in integrated schools. And certainly Bishop McAreevy was absolutely in no doubt whatsoever. He said that the preparation was every bit as good in an integrated school as it would have been in a Catholic school. Would you be satisfied with that comment that he made?
I think everything depends on the individual schools, but I know from celebrating confirmation in many of our parishes, we find that schools from educated schools as well as Catholic schools, and as well as some children who attend controlled schools, have one way or another been very well prepared, or as well prepared as anybody in the Catholic school, certainly. I understand that every school, as we look at ethos again, every school has a certain hidden curriculum, a certain informal curriculum, which is also very formative of people. But I certainly have never questioned the preparation of children for sacraments coming from schools outside the Catholic managed sector.
Just last one, really, just to turn to the Catholic Certificate of Education. I know it's open to anybody who goes to any of the major teacher training colleges now, and has been for some time. Do we have any idea what the take-up is for potential teachers wanting to take that certificate, who may not have been naturally intending to take it as Catholics? I mean, in other words, how many Protestants and people of no denomination at all have actually taken up the offer to achieve that certificate? Because it actually seems quite an onerous thing. It's 120 hours and 50 hours and postgrad and 3 years to obtain it and all the rest. It's a serious thing. So what's the take-up of non-Catholic applicants? Or maybe you wouldn't know.
I have no idea.
Yeah, it's not a figure we have to hand. And and it's a certificate in religious education, so it's not a specific Catholic certificate. We welcome the fact that Trustee and Ulster University are offering this certificate now to their students. It's something we can come back and we wouldn't have the figures to hand at this stage, but certainly the fact that it's much more accessible now is certainly to be welcomed. And there's a bit of work that goes into it. It's not just as you say, there's a number of hours that a candidate will have to go through. But we'd be happy to come back and get that information.
Yeah, well, in a way you don't need to, because everything you've said today indicates to me that your system is fair. You appear to be quite happy to employ non-Catholics, as long as, Jerry, as you said, are the right person for the job, which surely has to be the major criterion involved here. So, as I said...
Absolutely, Trevor. And just to reiterate that point again, Catholic education is open and welcoming and inclusive. There's work to be done through all of our sectors in terms of trying to move forward in partnership. Shared educational partnerships and programs is a prime example, and we need much more of that, and things are moving forward. But in terms of Catholic education, we welcome the best candidates for the role that they play, whether that be the leader, somebody in the support staff, one of the teachers, but it's also open and welcoming to everybody. But I have to say that point is also for our other sectors as well. Inclusivity is not the domain of any particular sector. We all have a role and a sharing in terms of bringing that forward, not just the Catholic maintained sector and the wider Catholic managed sector.
Yes, so if this change came into being, what difference would that actually make, given that you are intent on appointing the right person for the job in the first place?
Well, we always do.
I know you did, but so what difference would it make?
But it won't make any difference.
No,
We always do employ the best person.
Yeah.
And we've indicated we have no problem with it being removed.
No.
Absolutely not.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. I didn't intend to ask quite so many questions, but it's been very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you, Trevor. And can I ask Pat Sheehan to put a question to the briefing committee? Thanks.
Thanks, Sinead. And our guest still there?
Yeah,
Yeah, can hear you. Yeah, see you now. Thanks, Bishop McKeown, Jerry, Tony and Patricia. Thank you for your contribution here today. And I welcome the fact that you support the removal of this for employment exemption. I think everyone agrees that in this day and age it is an anachronism that should be done away with. Although and we've had some discussion around this, although it's a separate issue on the Certificate of Religious Education, that would still be a condition for employment of a teacher. A teacher would have to be in possession of the CRE before they could be employed in the Catholic school. That's right, isn't it?
In a Catholic primary school and some designated post-primary schools.
Sorry, I didn't catch that, Tony.
In primary schools, it would be a requirement, and in some designated posts in post-primary schools.
And Trevor already raised the issue about, you know, the preparation of children for sacraments in primary schools, and that, you know, Bishop McAreevy told him that the children were as well prepared in integrated schools as they were in Catholic schools. And that's interesting, because I suppose the debate we're having today is all around ethos. And ethos is a thing that most people seem to understand, yet have more difficulty defining. And I'm just wondering, given that the Catholic sector outperforms all the other sectors in terms of educational outcomes, do you see ethos and performance in some way being connected? And if you do, how is it connected? Thanks.
Could I come in briefly on that, Pat?
Yeah.
There's a book, I did an MBA over 20 years ago in educational management, but one of the books I read was by Beek, Lee and Holland from Harvard University, research on Catholic schools and the common good, particularly in the context of the US. And it did try to identify a number of elements in the Weltanschauung, the worldview of the Catholic school, that seemed to promote quality outcomes. And one of them was an inspirational ideology, an openness to the transcendent, strong emphasis on community, high expectations of all pupils, and all of those things. So there are many intangible things, but there seems to be evidence from around the world that schools with a strong opening to the transcendent actually do, for some inexplicable reason, deliver high quality outcomes, which is why they remain very popular. I remember a very senior civil servant in one department, not the Department of Education, I can assure you, saying there was a joke in his department some years ago that said that in order to sort of improve educational outcomes in Northern Ireland, we all should scrap every school a Catholic school, every school a good school, and replace it with one called every school a Catholic school. He was only joking about it, obviously. But there seems to be something in ethos, in the sort of the philosophy of schools with particular ethos, that for some reason or other delivers quality outcomes. I'm not saying that all Catholic schools do exceptionally well, but there does seem to be a characteristic across the sector. We're only committed to ensuring that particularly those who are failed by the system at present are pulled up, and that the system advantages the disadvantaged rather than further advantaging the already advantaged. Yeah, I think we have some contribution to make to quality outcomes in Northern Ireland, where we're still failing far too many of our young people. And we have to say mea culpa as well about the places where we're not doing as well as we could be for young people. And so I think, as Bowman and Deal said, the heart of leadership is in the hearts of leaders. And how do you possibly measure what's in the hearts of leaders? That's what we're trying to do in ensuring we promote a good ethos.
Pat, if I could maybe just come in on the back of Bishop Donald, one of the raison d'etres for the establishment of CCMS 30 years ago was to raise standards. And we've come a long way in terms of raising standards with Catholic maintained schools. There's still a journey for each of us to travel. You know, we look at the recent report, A Fair Start, and the challenge we have in tackling underachievement. So collectively, you know, all of us in education have a way to go. But the success of Catholic schools in raising standards and delivering high quality outcomes for so many of our young people, there's a strong connection with the school. I referenced this a few moments ago, being based in a local community, the local parish. The connection between the school, the family and the child itself is a strong element in terms of where schools have been able to make that difference for so many young people in terms of the high quality educational outcomes the high quality of standards and the work. And it's not just all about educational outcomes, it's about developing the young person to be a well-rounded individual who is respectful and can make a positive contribution to society and to the common good.
Okay, thanks for that. And, I welcome those comments and I acknowledge the high standards that have existed within the Catholic maintained sector for many years now. I suppose one issue I would have is that within the Catholic sector there are still many schools that implement academic selection, and I don't see how that in any way contributes to the ethos that has been discussed here today. And I know the Catholic hierarchy in particular has spoken against academic selection, but I think it's time for another push on this issue, particularly in the Down and Connor diocese, where academic selection is still very strong. And that academic selection in itself creates an ethos of division and segregation. And I know the Catholic sector has been accused, particularly in the context of this debate around integrated education, that the Catholic maintained sector is responsible in some way for segregation or sectarianism or so on. And I don't for one second accept that argument at all. But I have to be critical of the continued practice of academic selection within your own sector. And I do think it's time for you to take a strong stand against it. And it would certainly help improve, I think, standards within your own sector even further. Thank you.
Thank you. I take that on board. You know where I stand on that, Pat.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, thank you all for your contribution today, particularly Bishop McKeown, who fielded quite a lot of those questions, but also Jerry, Tony and Patricia, thank you very much for coming along here and sharing your observations. We had a bit of a bleed in relation to some of our questions because we went into integrated education and academic selection. However, it was opportune that we had you here to share your views and your observations on all of those. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, thank you for all those questions there. We are now moving into our next briefing, and the briefing is from the Integrated Education Fund and Ulster University. So can I refer members to pages 238 to 248 of the meeting pack and pages 3 to 6 on the table pack for the open papers. And can I welcome to the meeting Mr. Paul Collins, Head of Public Affairs and Advocacy, Integrated Education Fund, and Dr. Matthew Mulligan, Researcher, School of Education, UNESCO Centre, University of Ulster, and Miss Katrina Crilly, Principal of Oak Grove Integrated School, also in my constituency. Can I advise you that this session is being recorded by Hansard, and the video of the meeting will be available on the committee webpage. Okay, so can I invite members to brief the committee?
Good afternoon, Sinead. I just want to thank you for allowing ourselves to present today on behalf of the Integrated Education Movement and also the Ulster University. And to follow on from what was said earlier on, we'd like to pass on our condolences to Christopher Stalford's family and also to his colleagues in the Northern Ireland Assembly. It was a great shock to hear the news of the weekend, for sure. We had some dealings with Christopher. We always found him very professional and are very supportive of our work. So please pass on the condolences. I'd like to pass on to Dr. Matt Mulligan, who is the School of Education researcher at UNESCO Centre at Ulster University, who will do the main part of the presentation, and then we'll take questions afterwards. Thanks very much.
So if you'll just bear with me while I try to get technology sorted. Always an issue in these things. Okay, folks, can everyone see the screen now?
Perfect. Thank you.
Brilliant. I'd just start off by addressing something that Trevor Lunn raised about the composition of the teaching workforce and the levels of movement between sectors. Because of the veto exception, because of Article 71, there is no record of how many Catholics work in the control sector, how many Protestants work in the maintained sector, or in fact in any of the sectors. But I undertook research in 2018, which illuminated that. I conducted an online survey that was completed by over 1,000 teachers, approximately 5% of the total number of teachers out there, which allows a high degree of confidence. And I was able to show that in maintained primary schools, there's only 2% of teachers identify as Protestant. In controlled primary schools, there are about 7% identify as being Catholic. And integrated primary schools are considerably more balanced in their proportions. Post-primary do show greater diversity. Around 17% of teachers in controlled schools are Catholic, and around 8% of teachers in maintained schools are post-primary schools are Protestant. The figures are even more, are even higher than in grammar schools, where voluntary grammars, non-denominational voluntary grammars, have about 23% Catholic teachers, and Catholic grammar schools have about 17% Protestant teachers. So hopefully, Trevor, that answers your question. There is research out there, but it's not. There are no official statistics on it. And those statistics actually show a remarkable change from previous research that had been done into the matter. There'd only been 2 previous pieces of research, one in 1977 and another in 2004, and both of them showed remarkable community consistency in all sectors. That only 1 or 2% of outliers from Catholics working in state schools and Protestants working in maintained schools. One of the features of this is that there's a significant proportion of teachers who pass through education without any meaningful contact across the divide. I identified these as being culturally encapsulated teachers. And these are the people that are required to lead their pupils in the exploration of sensitive topics through shared education, yet they're actually less likely to have sat at any stage in their educational career alongside somebody of another faith than the plumber who comes to fix the school toilets. So in conjunction with the quantitative research that I did, I also did qualitative interviews with the purpose of sample of 30 teachers who had moved from their community of origin to work in a school on the other side. An analysis of this data showed that the pattern of deployment is underpinned by 3 issues: policy, perceptions, and practice. With regard to policy, just as we heard from CCMS, and just as we heard from the Bishop, the veto exception has rarely, if ever, called upon to actually justify an appointment. In fact, none of those that I interviewed could recall any incident where it had been. Teachers felt that there were other elements of policy that were more effective in limiting community crossover in the teaching profession. Primarily, and often mentioned, was the separation of the teaching colleges for those aspiring to teach in primary school. St Mary's on one side and Stranmillis on the other. And the ethos of those institutions prepared prospective teachers to adopt a one-sided outlook. They encouraged them to remain within familiar settings, and for example, by undertaking teaching practice within the associated sector. That also affected teachers, student teachers, opportunity, awareness and enthusiasm to undertake the RE certificate. The RE certificate that is required to teach and maintain primaries is delivered as part of the post-primary course in Ulster, which is a much more mixed environment. But it's only an optional additional course in Stranmillis, and it's an integral part in St Mary's. And in fact, it has virtually blanket coverage, to the extent to which a lot of teachers here can't get into Stranmillis or St Mary's and opt instead to go to colleges in England and in Scotland. And Catholic students choose generally to go to Catholic colleges in England, where they are able to get an equivalent certificate, whereas Protestant teachers who leave here, prospective teachers, tend to go to different colleges. So the division that we have here persists even for those who depart these shores. It's actually noticeable as well that historically the veto exception had been argued as a requirement by Protestant teachers to offset the imbalance that the Catholic teaching certificate required. So that requirement, because few Protestant teachers completed it, it felt like a barrier to employment in maintained schools. So the Protestant teachers required this counterbalance. But the aspiration of ensuring equality is not well served by offsetting one restrictive policy against another, or by justifying discrimination on the basis of mutual disadvantage. Interviews spoke, however, of a perception that there's no point in applying for a job in a school outside of your own sector. The community separation of teachers could be, therefore, a self-fulfilling prophecy. Teachers choose not to apply for posts on the other side because they presuppose that any such application would be unsuccessful. And the veracity of this supposition was effectively confirmed, but never really tested. The presence of the veto exception, however, contributes to a climate where religious discrimination is an accepted component in the process of appointing teachers. It's an effective deterrent by the simple virtue of its existence, and sends out a clear signal that prevents many Catholic teachers from considering employment in a controlled school or a Protestant teacher to apply to a maintained school. Notably, the veto exception has been called upon to justify intra-faith discrimination. It may be used, for example, to ensure that a teacher with a record of church attendance can be employed ahead of one whose faith adherence may have lapsed, or an applicant aligned with one Protestant denomination may be preferred to a better qualified teacher from another denomination. Appointments made to teaching posts are made, as already been mentioned, by voluntary boards of governors. These are often chaired or heavily influenced by clerics. And there were comments made that the veto exception had afforded church representatives to rule on the religiosity of a candidate and thereby enabled a culture of nepotism. Such employment practices do not work to the benefit of the creation of an inclusive, egalitarian society, or for ensuring effective local community relations, or of providing our children with the best education to prepare them for full engagement in a rich and diverse society. The evidence from my research indicates that removing the teacher exception would not immediately impact on the teaching of religious observance, such as the sacraments. These posts are already protected by the RE certificate requirement. The removal of the veto exception on its own is unlikely to have any large-scale immediate impact on the proportion of teachers who are employed across the divide. It has been suggested that it does enable integrated schools to use faith to discriminate between applicants for teaching posts to ensure that they have a balanced staff room. But as evidenced by the presence of the IEF and the principle of Oakwood here today, the proposed repeal has broad support across the integrated movement. The passing of this bill would, however, send out a clear, unequivocal signal that the Assembly is committed to equality, that discriminatory employment practices have been consigned to history, that this society values equality of opportunity, and that we want our children to be educated by the best teacher, best available teacher, of a particular faith. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, that was pretty stark in terms of some of the data there, which was missing. We didn't have that type of data. So there's very significant and clear division, which we would understand anyway, of the persistence, religious divisions within our controlled and our maintained sector. So that's kind of a given. And it's how, if this exclusion of the article is taken out of the bill, how it would impact on possibly that cross recruitment process that could help even that out and bring that society that you're talking about, that equal society, and that unequivocal message that this assembly and our executive upholds and wants to see going forward. In relation to if the exemption was removed, how do you think Catholic schools in particular might be able to maintain their ethos? Because we've heard a lot about the Catholic ethos in the previous presentation. It would be just interesting to hear your observations in relation to that.
I suppose the obvious line is that sitting beside somebody who thinks differently to you doesn't damage your ethos. It creates a different ethos. It creates an ethos of exchange, of listening, of learning from each other. It creates an ethos of diversity rather than exclusivity. It creates an ethos of inclusion rather than expelling people who think differently. And I think it creates a richer environment for pupils and staff alike.
Matthew, surely, the cause of segregation in schools, the exemption, it's really, is it really going to do much in terms of, Catholic children will predominantly still go to Catholic schools, Protestant children predominantly still go to Protestant schools, and they're in the division of teachers as well, possibly to reflect that. So will the exemption have the impact that we are seeking to do in terms of balancing that crossing over from controlled to maintained?
Yeah, a number of years ago, the Catholic certificate was required in both primary and post-primary schools. It's now only regarded as a requirement for primary schools and for some protected posts and post-primary. And potentially as a result of that, I can't say it's a direct result, but previous research into the levels of crossover had shown the same patterns of minimal crossover in primary and in post-primary. My research has indicated, actually in post-primary, genuinely, schools do seem to be trying to attract the best teacher, not just the best teacher of a particular religion. So I think it's not going to change immediately. There is a whole mindset change. The inclusion of the availability of the certificate course in Stranmillis will make a big change in the long term, but there is a mindset change that's required. It isn't legitimate to employ a nurse on the basis of her faith or his faith. It isn't legitimate to employ a manager on the basis of his or her faith. Why should it be legitimate to employ a teacher purely on the virtue of which church they go to?
And I suppose a necessity sometimes dictates the recruitment practices of some schools, and we know that some schools are having significant difficulties in recruiting some teachers for particular subjects, particularly in our secondary sector, for example, maths teachers, science teachers, and therefore once you get into the specifics of the skill base or the expertise base, you're opening up to other schools. So in a way, this might be very, very good for people, for teachers in particular that are out there looking to secure a full-time post in the school, that they have a wider net to throw in relation to seeking a job in a full-time contract in a wider number of schools. So we could all be winners, really.
Absolutely. I mean, some of the teachers that I spoke to who had crossed over had never looked, for example, in the Irish News for a teaching post. It wouldn't have crossed their mind to have done that. Others wouldn't have crossed their mind. There was one teacher who came back from England, wanted to come back. She'd trained over there. She'd taught for a number of years over there, and she wouldn't have thought. But somebody put the job under her nose and said, "Apply for that one." I said, "But that's on the other side." "No, apply for that one." And she got it, and she's engaged fully in that school now. So, it's a win-win, surely.
Yeah. Okay. And sometimes, ethos to me at school, when my kids were at school, I used to always talk about the pastoral care of the school, and the pastoral care was about how they looked after my daughters. How they cared for them, in regards to their mental health, their whole person, their whole thing. And again, the pastoral care of how a school looks after their teachers is really, really important as well. And I don't think necessarily that's always on the grounds of religion. I think entirely it isn't either. It's about good leadership and all the things that we spoke about before. But anyway, sorry. I have got an indication that Pat would like to ask a question. So can we bring Pat in, please?
Thank you, Chair. And thanks to our guests, Paul and Matt, today. I don't see them yet. There you go. Thanks. There seems to be consensus that this exemption and fair employment legislation is an anachronism and should be done away with, and that's to be welcomed. I suppose one of the big issues or concepts that has arisen in the discussions we have been having to date is this issue of ethos, and we heard it last week during our evidence session and again today. I suppose I'm going to ask the same question, Matt, as I asked our previous contributors. The Catholic sector, by all accounts, outperforms all the other sectors in terms of educational outcomes. And that sector would attribute that, at least partly, to the ethos in their schools. I mean, you're a researcher in the area of education. What evidence is there of that? And if there is evidence, how does it actually work that the ethos impacts on the educational outcomes in a particular school or sector? Thanks. I know it's a bit of a hazy question, probably difficult to answer, but do your best anyway. Thanks.
It's an excellent question, Pat. The easy questions are no fun at all. The first thing you ask is about, is there any research? And the simple answer to that is very, very limited. Ethos is an area, because it's so nebulous, because it's so difficult to define, it's one of those areas that's difficult to research. But I would counter that argument. Yes, Catholic schools do perform well, but would we have a situation where we say that's a hospital that's performing well, therefore we only employ white nurses or Muslim nurses or black nurses? It doesn't make sense that the faith or political outlook of a particular teacher would counteract a school that operates effectively.
Oh, no, and I agree with that. I mean, I think teachers should have the same protections under employment legislation as any other worker or employee in the workforce, and that goes without saying. But And I know it was a difficult question, but that was really all I wanted to ask. So thanks for that. Thanks.
No worries.
Can I bring Pádraig Delargy in for a question, please? Thank you.
Can you hear me okay there?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. Thanks to our guests for joining us today. I just wanted to declare an interest first as a former primary school teacher. So just a couple of points on it rather than anything else. I actually did a PGC at Ulster. It's the only place, obviously, in the north now where you can do the primary PGC. And then I know from having gone through the religious education certificate myself that while you do a lot of the training together, there's still a case where you go off and you train in sacramental preparation and then the teachers who aren't looking to go into Catholic education train in different part of religion. So there still is that kind of segregation, and I suppose it's necessary in terms of sacramental preparation, but it becomes a case then of you did the joint religious certificate, but did you do the Catholic one or the Protestant one? So that's persistent, and that raises its head then when you go for a job interview. It's just something I want to flag up with you. Actually, just Matt, when you mentioned about teachers moving back from England, I had a conversation actually with one of my friends this morning who is in that process at the minute. Another key problem in attracting teachers and in diversifying the workforce is that the education jobs are all advertised on separate platforms. So you'll have to go through CCMS, you'll have to go through EA, you'll have to go through whatever other number of websites and kind of bureaucracy to actually find the jobs in the first place. So that obviously presents a difficulty. And just the last point as well, around trying to introduce, I suppose, a broader range of teachers of all religious backgrounds, particularly in the Catholic education, was where I had taught most recently. And I know that in a lot of those applications, while there is the obvious thing about the Catholic ethos, and that word ethos rather than religion is the one that's encouraged, you're also asked for dates and evidence of that. Now, if you hadn't grown up in a Catholic faith background, or indeed if you weren't a practicing Catholic, what evidence would you have to support that? So your application effectively falls flat in its face from the get-go. I know you're probably well aware of those points, but just from a practical and obviously as someone who's experienced those myself, I just wanted to register them with you. I think that the presentation was very, very interesting, and a lot of it rang very true with my own experience as well.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Do you want to comment on that? I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with what you've said. The model in Ulster for the RE certificate is an interesting one. It's slightly different to that provided in St Mary's, and the St Mary's model is the one that's used in Stranmillis. With it's a package that basically Stranmillis have bought in, for want of a better word, from St Mary's. But the Ulster model is where teachers, primary school PGCE teachers, train alongside one another, who work alongside one another, and who undertake their RE certificate alongside one another, with a few outliers as required by the various sides. But it is much easier, I think, for a Protestant student to undertake the RE cert at Ulster than it would be in Stranmillis. But I would say that, wouldn't I?
Okay, before we finish off, Matthew, I was wondering, did Katrina want to make any contributions there? Obviously, she works in the integrated sector, and possibly she has experiences or maybe a contribution to make around this ethos that we speak about in relation to the protections of schools' ethos. So has she any contribution that you would like to make there?
Hi, Chair. Yes, thank you for that. My contribution to this really is around the whole removal of the veto. And yes, you know, on the ground, and when you look at it in the integrated sector, we may have needed it in order to maintain balance. In my opinion, in my experience, I have never had to do that. And I think that actually the veto, if we get to change, you know, the mindset, and we have a broader spectrum and more open choice for teachers across all sectors, then that's going to bring much more vibrancy and, you know, a greater pull. Because when we bring it back, it's really fundamentally about the people who are child-centred, the people who want to provide high-quality teaching and learning for children without any religious barriers whatsoever. And I can only see that the removal of it is going to create that bigger pool of teachers bringing different skill sets into schools and organisations. And through that, you will always get the best person for the job, because you've got a broader scope to, you know, of your pool for recruitment. So that for me has to be a win-win there. Certainly if you've got a bigger pool and more applicants from both communities, then we have just been up to now, never really had a problem with regards to the balance, because we are able to always get the right person for the job through a rigorous recruitment process. And really, I think when you think about the ethos of schools, for me, ethos is driven by the people, by the community, and by all those individuals who are child-centred. And I know that's a phrase that gets bandied about a lot. Being child-centred is an in thing, and you know, you'll never have an interview, but somebody will tell you how child-centred they are. But you know, at the end of the day, that's something that can't be written in words. That's something that comes about from the fact that this is a vocational profession, and one where, you know, on the whole, teachers, in the face of it and the challenges that we face day in, day out, are here because of the children and because of wanting the very best outcomes for them. That in itself generates an ethos of everyone working for the greater good of every single child in the building. And for me, that's where the ethos comes from, regardless of religious background of the school. So that's my contribution.
Thank you, Katrina. I have two members who wish to ask questions. So can I bring into the spotlight Diane Dodds, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's really to Matthew. You said there isn't a lot of information, official information, around the stats as regards to who teaches in which schools. You may have said this and I may have missed it. How did you gather the information that you presented to us?
Sure, it was a questionnaire that I circulated to all teachers in Northern Ireland. All teachers have designated email addresses, and I circulated that through schools to teachers throughout Northern Ireland.
Okay, I'm not questioning, because it seems. It seems to me the sort of thing that you would answer, that you'd get back. What kind of uptake did you get then on the questionnaire in relation to it?
There were over 1,000 responses to the questionnaire. There are about 18,000 teachers on the GCN General Teaching Council role in Northern Ireland. So it was about 5%, which allows me to say that with 95%. With 95% confidence that the figures are right within 3%.
Okay. They sound sensible. I mean, I just was interested in how you'd actually achieved that. Thank you, Chair.
No, it's statistically valid research.
Thank you. Can I bring Emma in for a question, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to you all for the presentation. I suppose I just had a question around, obviously, the removal of the veto is around, you know, bringing teachers under the same equality employment legislation that everyone else has access to. And I had, I suppose, two questions. We effectively have two big sectors in terms of education in the north, and whether you call it ethos or religion or cultural ethos maybe, there are two main cultural or religious ethos there. And I wonder if that has a negative impact then on people who don't designate as Christian of any denomination, and how their thoughts and needs are being considered in terms of how they're educated, and whether or not they're excluded. We know that we have loads of newcomer communities to the north who perhaps might attend a Catholic maintained school or a controlled school, and are they left to feel excluded if they don't want to engage in religious lessons. And the other thing then that I wanted to ask was around, as we have two sort of cultural sectors in terms of education, whether the fact that we have two separate and distinct, perhaps historical curriculums and cultural outlooks, whether that breeds division and doesn't do anything to help relations amongst the traditional two communities in the north.
I'm happy to respond to that. I suppose the first question. I'm trying to remember the question. They were also long. Maybe it's just the time of day. But
it's just around if there are pupils at school at either level who aren't Christian, how their impact and how their needs are considered.
Well, it's essentially the education system here is Christian. Schools are required to have a daily act of Christian worship. They have an RE curriculum that they have to follow that is devised by the Catholic Church, the Presbyterian Church, Church of Ireland and Methodist Church. There's no input from any other faith or anybody of a different world outlook, a humanist or an atheist in there. So our schools are Christian institutions. That Christianity is much more developed in Catholic schools. It's much more upfront in Catholic schools. It's much more present, but in a different context in control schools. Control schools generally identify with a British identity, and maintained schools generally support an Irish cultural identity. I don't think there's anything new in that, but that's the way it is. One of the interesting things that my research also identified was the phenomenal lack of teachers that don't fit within either of those two identities. There are very few teachers of colour in Northern Ireland. There are very few teachers who originate from outside of these two islands. There is very limited ethnic diversity outside the ethno-political British, Protestant, Catholic, Irish divide. So yeah, there's and in terms of the divisive nature of the curriculum, there's a common curriculum. All schools in Northern Ireland follow the same curriculum. The interpretation and the emphasis placed on different bits of it is what marks the two sectors out from each other. But they follow the same curriculum. There aren't two curricula.
Sarah, can I come in, Chair?
Yes, please do.
Chair, if I can just come in just to clarify in terms of the integrated education sector. In terms of integrated primary schools, speaking from personal experience, children have gone through primary and now post-primary. In terms of my two daughters went forward integrated primary school, there was effectively three types of religious as such education you could have. One was Catholic, which then prepared you for the various sacraments, be that baptism, a first confession, a confirmation. You then had a different section which was broader Christian kind of faith, and then the last was then a kind of a religions and faiths of the world. There is sort of, I think pretty much all schools in Northern Ireland follow a kind of broad Christian approach, but in the integrated sector, there's those kind of three choices which the parents then take and decide to go down that path.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much to everyone for your presentations. It was very insightful, so it's been much appreciated. Would it be helpful, or could you perhaps, Matthew, share those slides with us, with the committee?
I sent them through to who was it I was talking to yesterday?
Michael, probably. That's okay.
I sent them through there
Yeah.
a couple of hours before the presentation.
Okay, that's excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, members. Just if we could maybe take a few moments to recap just where we are with this second stage debate for the bill. It's scheduled, as you're aware, for the 2nd of March. And as you're also aware, the bill will not progress through all its stages before the end of the mandate. The committee agreed in January to take evidence and produce a report on the bill, and the committee's online survey now closes on the 7th of March. And as of yesterday, there were 314 responses received, which is really good. An interim report on the responses will be provided for the meeting on the 9th of March, with final analysis included in the draft report for the meeting of the 16th of March. The Research Service will provide a bill paper on the bill. And so can I seek your agreement that this paper be presented at the meeting on the 9th of March?
Yep, happy.
Okay. Members, I also need to know if you're happy that you've heard sufficient evidence to commence consideration stage of the bill for the committee report by the end of the mandate, or do you want to hear further evidence in the time that is available? Maybe if I talk you through some of the implications of that, just a couple of the options in relation to that. So here are the options. So we can either finish taking evidence on the bill and consider the oral evidence, consultation results and the research paper for consideration of the bill at the meetings on the 9th and 16th of March, or if you decide you want to hear more evidence, from whom would you like to hear more members or evidence from? For example, do you want to hear evidence from the teaching unions? Do you want to hear from the teaching training colleges? Maybe do you want to hear from parent representative bodies, governors, etc.? Maybe even the department itself. So if you want to hear more evidence, we need to kind of make allowances for that within the time permitting. As you know, it's very tight. It would be really good to get a report on the surveys and analysis back to the committee and all of that. But just bearing in mind those time commitments. So what would you advise?
Chair, do we have any stakeholders who are openly opposed to the removal of this exemption that you're aware of?
I am not aware. I mean, the overwhelming evidence that we are receiving is that people and organisations and bodies are content, and I suppose not only content but want to see the removal of the veto. So I think the evidence and also the online consultation will probably give us more evidence of that. And I'm sure union bodies and others will have submitted to that consultation online as well. So we'll get some of those responses.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It seems the overwhelming opinion is that this exemption should be removed. Hence the diversion today into integrated education and academic selection and so on. So I'm not sure, given the time we have left, what use there would be in trilling all these witnesses in to tell us they agree with the removal, unless there's any other aspect to this legislation that stakeholders would like to flag up, I suggest we move forward as quickly as possible.
Chair, I'd agree with Pat on that. I think there's been a lot of responses, both to our consultation and to the proposer of the bill, and all the ones you mentioned, whether it's teacher unions, training colleges, parent reps, have all in some form either made representation to Christopher Little's original call for evidence or to our own committee one. So I think that there's probably not many more places to look here, and we're also limited by time.
Well, I would tend to agree with that as well. So I think we finished taking the evidence and look through the consultation results and the research paper for the consideration, so that we can get presentations on the 19th and the 16th of March. Okay, agreed?
Agreed.
Item number 7 on the agenda is SL1, the Department's Transfer of Functions Appeal Service Order NI 2022. Members of the committee agreed at last week's meeting to consider the SL1 as a separate agenda item today. Can I refer members to pages 249 to 274 of the meeting pack for relevant papers? This SL1 will transfer statutory responsibility for the Appeal Service and Rent Assessment Panel from the Department for Communities to the Department of Justice. The committee wrote to the Committee for Justice and the Committee for Communities for their views on the proposed legislation. Both committees responded to say that they are content with the proposal. Members, if you have any concerns to be raised with the Department on whether they are content with the proposed order. And can I just also remind members that this will be carried over to the successor committee, because we have an absence of First Minister and Deputy First Minister to introduce the order in the next Assembly mandate. But happy to proceed. Okay. Item number 8, Forward Work Programme. Can I refer members to pages 276 and 281 of the meeting pack for the Forward Work Programme. So if members are content with to note the programme going forward. Obviously, we'll await the response from the department in relation to junior ministers and see where the land lies there, and we possibly will put in a brief from the ministers in the coming few weeks. Item number 9, correspondence. Members, there are 10 items of correspondence from pages 282 to 217. Which that's not right, 217 to 282 of the meeting pack. There are 4 items in the table pack as well, but first of all, 9.1, Northern Ireland Office, Conor Byrne's response on issues in relation to the dedicated mechanism. 9.2 is the Northern Ireland Office, Conor Byrne's response on the nationality and borders bills and ETA requirements. 9.3, the Executive Office, Tackling Violence Against Women and Girls Strategy, extension for calls for views to the 21st of March. Just to remind members, the clerk will produce a report based on the stakeholder engagement that's taking place tomorrow, and that will also be presented to the department. 9.4, the Executive Office news release, 6 dimensions of the Nation Brands Index 2021. 9.5, Communities Committee to the Executive Office, funding announcement by the Chancellor of the Exchequer. 9.6, DERA Committee response to the draft investment strategy for Northern Ireland. 9.7, Finance Committee memo on the Finance Department response to Hart Report Actions and Budget Act. 9.8, Finance Committee response draft investment strategy for Northern Ireland. 9.9, correspondence from the Speaker to all committee chairs regarding business committee decisions. Next week's committee meeting may be affected by additional sittings, as members will be aware. Also, that the Fair Employment School Teachers Bill, as you know, will second stage is scheduled to take place that afternoon. I think next Wednesday afternoon is the schedule. So Chairperson's Liaison Group 9.10 was a clerk, or was to all of the committees regarding increasing diversity of witnesses, and we've indicated the need for diversification in bringing witnesses to our committee, and we hope that that's replicated throughout all of committees. 9.11 joint statement by the UK Foreign Secretary and European Commission Vice President on the meeting of the Withdrawal Agreement Joint Committee on the 21st of February, and there wasn't really much to report on that either. 9.12 the Executive Office news release Junior Minister statement on the death of Christopher Stalford. 9.13 Survivors Together, condolences on the death of Christopher Stalford. 9.14 Chairman's Liaison Group draft report on the strengthening committee scrutiny. Members, this came into all of the committees by the CLG chair, and there are 33 recommendations in the report, and this is all to do with strengthening the scrutiny of our committees. Are members content with the recommendations? And if so, we can write a letter back to CLG to say that we're content with the direction of travel within the recommendations.
Content.
Okay. So if you're content to note the rest of the correspondence, item number 10, any other business? Have members any other business they wish to raise?
No, Chair.
No.
Thank you.
So the date, time and place of next meeting is next Wednesday, the 2nd of March at 2 p.m, room 30. And I will put in my apologies. I'm travelling to Brussels next Wednesday, so I won't be available. But my colleague, John, will ably chair.
Oh, I don't know about that. I'll do my best, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.